Shockwolf 1200 Films Podcast, all horror, all the time. Of course, our scale on the bottom, we have dumpster fire garbage, then we have can't quite recommend, and then okay if desperate, then put on the watch list, and of course, at the very, very tippy top, we have put on top of the watch list. And once again, nothing is going on top of the watch list on this group. One movie came close, but it'll still probably be top 5 of the year. God damn, I should just put it up there. But on the episode after this one, I cover a couple of 80s films, and then after that, I'm done. I'm done with 80s horror. There's nothing left. Every list I look at, I say, you've seen it, or it's some weird, bizarro foreign film I have no interest in seeing. I've already seen Santa Sangre and Deep Red. I have no more need for bizarro, weirdo, twisty, elephant murdering horror films like those. There is nothing weirder than the movie Santa Sangre. There's a reason Michael Jackson loves that movie. But I will be starting into 70s horror, so like Richard Dawson's character in Running Man, desperate times call for desperate measures, and that's where we're at. Since they're obviously not releasing much new horror, but let's get going on this list. 2018 Party Hard, Die Young. The actual title is like Duscht von Duscht die Büste. It's a film from Austria. Nothing on Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb has it as a 5.2 out of 10. As you know, for a horror, that's not bad for IMDb rating. It's a basic teen slasher. These 8 friends, they go to this weird little bizarre island out in the middle of nowhere to party, do drugs. And of course, there's a slasher on the loose, and one of the friends is a little chunky. So you figured, that chunky kid's not making it. Chunky kid's always one of the first to go, and he was. But as a slasher, it's not bad. It's directed well. There was some interesting scenes of gore and violence, but I would say it's okay if desperate. 1981 Southern Comfort. How did I miss this one? Oh boy, you take well, let me give you the ratings first. Rotten Tomatoes has a critic rating of 78, audience score of 76. You take Platoon and you mix it with Cabin Fever. Not Cabin Fever, Wrong Turn. And then you mix it in with a little Deliverance, a little spice of Deliverance, and you get Southern Comfort. Some big names in this: Keith Carradine, Powers Booth, and Fred Ward, who went on a few years later to co-star with Kevin Bacon in the great movie Tremors. And then they made like 6 more Tremor movies, but which were progressively bad. This also had a black actor I knew I recognized from something. His name is T.K. Carter, and he was the co-star in the movie The Thing with Kurt Russell. He then went on to co-star in Punky Brewster. And then his career went downhill, and he did the Sinbad show. But, yes, it was, what happened in the beginning to get this movie rolling. These soldiers are out training out in the Everglades, and it's swamp, and they see these rednecks out there hunting, so they decide, you know what, we need a boat, we're just going to take their boat. So once the rednecks come looking for their boat, they said, you know what, let's fire these blanks at them just to scare them. So you're already stealing their boat, now you're going to shoot at them, and they don't know it's blanks. So of course the rednecks start shooting back with live rounds, and some of those live rounds connected. And now you got a little war on your hands. And these rednecks know these swamps, and these soldiers do not. So the rednecks had a top advantage over the soldiers. So the soldiers are spending the most of the movie scurrying away. So that's the basic gist of the movie. Yeah, I would say this was an excellent movie. Put it on the watch list. Yeah, fun times. Oh boy, another one from 1981. Yes, I did a search on Amazon for horror movies from 1981. And this is the other one that came up. The Burning. Critic rating of 89%. Audience score of 61. This was a basic slasher. But the people starring in this film... a supposedly teenage Jason Alexander from Seinfeld fame. He looked like he was 16 in this. He was actually 21. And this was only 8 years before he started doing Seinfeld episodes, which doesn't seem possible. This also had a young Fisher Stevens who went on to star in the Short Circuit movies. He was actually young in this. He was only 17. And then it had a young Holly Hunter who was 22, which is about what she looked. And then there was this actress, I could not put my finger on it, but I knew her from something. And I could see her like doing a pose where she put like her hand in her fist and the other hand, and like, what do I know her from? I can see images from other movies that she was in, but I can't pinpoint her. I eventually had to give up and do an internet search. She was John Claude's girlfriend in Bloodsport. Leah Ayres, that's her name. But other than that, she hasn't done much. But yeah, she was in that one. Probably because I just watched that maybe a year ago, so that's kind of how I remembered her. But anyway, The Burning. So it's a campground counselor movie, just like the Friday the 13th. But these kids play this joke on, I guess, the janitor or something, or the groundskeeper. So they get this skull, and it's like a candle, and they light it, and they put it on his little dresser to scare him, and he wakes up and he kicks the thing so it falls in his bed, and of course 2 seconds later the fire has completely engulfed him and he's running around crazy, yet somehow he survives. And he spends several years in the hospital, and eventually they tell him, we can't do anything more for you, you have to leave. So now he's all disfigured and messed up, so he decides to go back to the camp, even though none of the people are there. But he says go back to the camp and start killing kids. He says, okay, Jason Alexander, Fisher Stevens, Holly Hunter, you're going to get stabbed by my scissors, my hedge clippers. And that's the movie. It's worth it just alone for all the young actors in this before they became stars. But yes, still a good film, I would say. Okay if desperate. And then we got an interesting one. 2015, Dude, Bro Massacre III. There is no 1 and 2. That's kind of the joke. It's critic rating 90%. Audience score is 76. It's supposed to be this random weird film that was made in the 80s. And there was no copies that existed, but one guy recorded it off cable at 4 a.m. on his VCR or his Betamax, who knows. And he recorded it, and it's got the commercials in there too, which is amazing. They could have cut those out in post-editing, but that's also part of the joke. You're watching this really poor VHS copy version, and even though it was not made in the 80s, obviously it was just made to look like it was, but the whole VHS thing is just an extra layer. This co-stars Larry King, Patton Oswalt. How did this low budget get these people? I don't know, but it's a plot line I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you what was the plot of this. I just remember craziness and people getting blown up and cut up left and right. So go ahead, okay if desperate. That sounds interesting. Go for it. It was interesting. 2020, You Should Have Left. Critic rating 40%, audience score 23. I didn't think it was that bad. This is the new horror from Kevin Bacon. About every 5 years or so, Kevin Bacon pops out a horror. And usually it's better than this. But this wasn't horrible. It's a ghost. It's a haunting story. It's mostly to do with the house. I think the house is probably the most interesting character in this film. The little girl is an excellent little actress. She impressed me. The woman that played Kevin Bacon's wife, I can't remember her name, but she must be 30 years younger than he is. And they mentioned that during the film, which made me glad because it needs to be addressed. But, hey, the heart wants what the heart wants, right? But anyway, it's just not strong enough a story or original enough story to be like really good. It's just another okay if desperate. If there's nothing in the red box you haven't seen and you want to check out that one, you're in the mood for a horror, you could do worse. Next one. Did I say okay if desperate for that one? Yeah, I think I did. 2017 Scarecrows. If you do a search on Rotten Tomatoes for Scarecrows, about 50 things come up. But not this one. Not this film. There's a movie called Scarecrow Gone Wild that comes up. It is a comedy horror starring Ken Shamrock. Ex-UFC fighter and pro wrestler Ken Shamrock. No, I'm not watching it. But Scarecrows. 2017, nothing on Rotten Tomatoes, but IMDb has it as a 4.1 out of 10. This was almost really good. If it had a different director, or maybe a different cinematographer, it could have been another step up. Basically, these 4 teens are going to this lagoon that's out in the middle of nowhere next to this farmland, and the farmer on that neighboring farmland has lost his mind, and anyone that gets near or on his land, he kidnaps, and then he sews their mouth shut and nails them to the cross like Jesus, and puts a bag over their head, and they are a scarecrow, and they are to sit out in the field until they die. And even then, their corpse is still out there, apparently. So that's what he does. So that's what these teens got to put up with. They got to run away from this crazy farmer, or else he will nail them in the cornfield. Yes, fun stuff. Like I said, it was almost great. The concept, I know, sounds really good, but the delivery was, I would say, another okay if desperate. And then we got in 2020, We Summon the Darkness. Hi, kitty. What are you doing? We Summon the Darkness. Critic rating 69%. Audience score of 30. This was, if you look it up, it'll say 2019, but it was delayed and it wasn't released until midway through 2020. So this is, in my opinion, a 2020 film. But co-stars Johnny Knoxville from Jackass, who's probably in it for all of 10 minutes. But basically, these traveling occultists are going around the country and torturing and killing people in the name of Satan. And one of their fathers happens to be Johnny Knoxville, who is a mega preacher pastor. So that makes for an interesting dynamic, I guess. Of course, they try to do some killings and it gets out of hand, and that's where the film goes. And okay, if desperate, it's just meh, meh. And now it's time for our feature review, Sea Fever.
What is that? How long till they eat through the boat?
That's inside the boat. It went into the water. We're all vulnerable to get infected.
What can I say?
I want you to test all of us. Those things will spread really fast. We need to quarantine ourselves. We're making port tonight. But you don't understand.
You're not hearing me!
2020 Sea Fever. Critic rating 86%, audience score of 48. It's basically a cabin fever out in the ocean. This girl, who's a college student, I guess, and she's out testing water chemicals and whatever, and microbes out in the ocean. So she goes in this fishing boat with this hardy crew, let's say. And eventually their boat gets stopped by this giant thing with tentacles, and the tentacles is kind of poking into the boat, and it's like dropping off little bugs and maggots and stuff, and they get into the water supply, and people drink them, and their eyes explode. And that's kind of where this movie starts. Yeah, that's what you have to look forward to. But it's done in an eerie enough of a way to make it really good, not great. Nothing about this film was bad. It's just seems like I've seen it before, but I can't put my finger. It might come to me. But like I said, it's a parasite on a boat, and then they have to make the decision: do we go back to the mainland and try and possibly spread this to the little people, a la COVID? We don't need another pandemic. And that's what the situation these people were kind of stuck with too. But yes, I would say it's put on the watch list. I would say check this out. Red box it if it's in there. Other than that, I can't tell you much about it. Let's go into next week. Next week we got or next episode. I doubt it'll be next week. We got a movie called Dark Light. Looks to be an alien movie. And maybe we'll discuss a few other alien movies that you may have missed. And then we have one called Host. Rotten Tomatoes has already come out with a list of best horror films from 2020. And Host is number 1. Like I've said many times before, we'll see about that. Then we got one called Hex, one called Greenlight, one called Homewrecker. And then we go back to the 70s. We got one called Dan Curtis's Dracula. It's Jack Palance from City Slickers, starring as Dracula. My expectations are low, but we'll see. Then we got another one from the 80s called Creature. And probably one of the last ones I can find from the 80s called Pen. The trailer looks amazing for Pen. We'll see if it can hold up. P-I-N, Pen. Yeah, it's a Canadian horror film. I think Thrill List listed as the top 10 80s films you haven't seen. Of course, it was one of the two I hadn't seen. Those lists make me laugh. It's like, nope, seen it. Oh, there's one I haven't seen. But yeah, anyway, so until next time, stay scary.